Okay, I think we're live. So now I just need to get it shared to the group. If you are joining us, please drop a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from. I see there's already a few of you that have hopped on. So just give me just a minute to get this shared and then we'll get going. Almost done. All right. Great, we are live. So welcome everyone to this month's TBI talk. I am here with Dr. Perry Maynard from Integrated Brain Centers. And today's topic is spurred from an email I received this morning. And I thought it would actually be a really great topic for this month's talk. I received an email after I sent out a email talking about how yoga helped me recover from my brain injury. And I received a response back telling me, FYI, you can't recover from a brain injury. But by the way, I like most of your work. And I was like, okay. So I took a moment with it and I was like, you know what? I bet this person's been told that by a doctor. And I know for me personally, at my 1-year mark, I was told by the neurologist, well, this is probably the best that you'll get. You probably won't get any better than this. And I was like, that is not okay. That is not the right answer. And so that's actually when I turned to yoga to help me in my recovery. And unfortunately, it took me 2 more years to find functional neurology, which, as most of you know, that's what Dr. Perry specializes in, and that's what helped me in my recovery. It gave me my life back. And so I think it's such an important topic today, because I feel like people lose hope if they think that they can't recover. And if you believe you can't recover, if someone has told you that, you're not going to recover, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the power, exactly, the power of mind and even suggestion, which some might look at as a negative, is a very real thing. There's a reason why things are tested against placebos, and that something has to show that it is better than a placebo, because a placebo itself can have improvements. And how do you explain that other than one's neurology and how it influences outlook and all these different things? And we could talk about other cases of that, but
yeah. So I mean, okay, Perry, so let's dive in. Can you recover from a TBI?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And like you and I were kind of chatting, I think we have to look at a few different things of what is recovery, right? If you look at the definition,
what does it mean
of recovery, right? It is one defined in Webster's dictionary as getting back to a state of normal health. I'd make the argument that recovery has it's a continuum. It's not black or white. If you look at recovery from an ACL, one might say you are going to get 50% recovered. So to say that, once again, I believe that recovery is a continuum. Recovery is not all or nothing. It is a spectrum of, yes, full recovery is back to oneself pre-accident, but then how do you define that? And we'll talk about, are we looking at symptoms, right? So does someone report no more symptoms, and does that mean they're recovered? Or do we have objective data pre and post to know that there's recovery? And like we'll talk about in a second, not that the NFL is the best example, but as we're getting pre and post testing, people have to be able to recover because people have a head injury, they have pre-testing, and we have testing showing that they return to pre-testing so that they can return back to sport. So right off the bat, we know that it occurs. But I think, first of all, we also define concussions and brain injuries a little bit more, because I will agree that a mild concussion is very different than a severe brain injury, right? So if
Right.
we're classifying brain injuries, right, we have mild traumatic brain injuries, we have moderate, and we have severe to keep it simple. And these all have to do with the Glasgow Coma Scale, which in essence shows you how severe someone's brain has been injured. And that's very different than, let's say, a sports-related concussion, right? Because we're looking at different levels of trauma to the brain. So right off the bat, to give a statement that you cannot recover, well, what are we talking about? Are we talking about somebody who was in a football collision and maybe they didn't lose consciousness and they have mild symptoms related to a concussion, they have a diagnosed concussion? Or are we talking about somebody who, we were chatting earlier just a second ago, take an example of like a Kevin Pierce, who suffered a pretty severe brain injury while snowboarding and was in, Craig Hospital and had to relearn a lot of everyday function things. Those are two different people.
And I mean, I'm just gonna stop you there for a second. So like he was in a coma for like a couple days, and then he had to relearn how to walk. Like that in itself is recovery.
I agree with you. And I think this is an important piece. We talk about this is because it's not an empowering narrative. It's kind of like the narrative around genetics. Some things are genetics play a role, but I don't know sometimes why we dwell so much on genetics if
Yeah.
they can't be changed. And we know that we have epigenetics, which is our environment changes the expression of our genes. We need to focus on things that are empowering in getting someone better versus things that are not empowering. So I think going back to it,
Yeah.
we need to categorize brain injury. And then we need to go back to this idea that the brain can or cannot heal. And I thought that we had kind of gotten past that outdated knowledge that the brain can't heal. A great book that really started to shed light on the popularity of neuroplasticity is Norman Dodge. He's a medical neurologist, and it's the brain that changes itself. And it's a great book about the concept of neuroplasticity, right? Which is the idea of creating new neuronal connections. Now, I will agree that there is debate on, can we create new neurons? So we know that certain areas in the hippocampus, in the areas of the brain, we do have neurogenesis, but largely it's still unclear, and it's still argued that most of the brain cannot create new neurons. But what it can do is it can create branching off. So say this neuron did this one job and had this one connection. Well, when I become symptom free, most likely what may be happening, or I have improvement in symptoms, is this neuron or this neuronal network is now picking up the slack for other areas, right? That we know that individuals relearn how to speak after strokes, right? And that is
Right.
through brain dead tissue. We know that individuals can regain the ability to walk with spinal cord injury, right? So I think we have plenty of proof and data to show that the brain is plastic, right? For the longest time, we thought it is what it is. Your brain can't change. And I think that is the farthest thing from the truth. And I think that's not just anecdotal evidence. I think there's plenty of rigorous peer-reviewed evidence to show that the brain is plastic and it can change and adapt. So if that's the case, then a traumatic brain injury or concussion has the potential to improve. And we see this also in even randomized trials that are looking at different therapies. So let's take the consensus statement. So every few years, we have the concussion consensus statement. It's related to sports-related concussions, but all the experts in concussions get together in a different city within the world to discuss the most up-to-date research on management and treatment of sports-related concussions. And in that's where they'll bring up and look at evidence and say how much evidence is around vestibular rehabilitation in improving functionality of a brain injury, vision therapy, cognitive therapy, chiropractic, PT, massage, right? All these things are studied. And in these consensus statements, which kind of analyze all the data, they show which ones have efficacy and which ones do not. So there is also research to show different therapies can take an individual that has maybe a certain symptom score and get them to another symptom score. So, and some might argue this is anecdotal, but I see it every day. And I've seen it for years and years and years. And I have many colleagues who have been practicing from 10 to 20 to 25 years, who've treated thousands and thousands and thousands of people with concussions, and have objective data of symptom scores going from this to this. But not even that, is balance scores, cognitive scores,
Yeah.
maybe one day, we can even share that, where, and this is how you kind of prove, is you can take objective data that has been researched, and then you can see pre and post changes. So I would make the argument there that not only if someone says their headache went from a 5 to a 1 or a 0, but also their reaction time improved back into a normal range, their executive function improved back into a normal range, their verbal and visual memory improved back into a normal range. Well, how do you fake those? So we can see
Right.
that once again. Now the question is, did that area of the frontal lobe itself totally heal? We don't know, but something is picking up the slack. And so as long as we see improvements in symptoms and we see improvement in function in everyday life, I don't think it really matters at this point. Is the point is we need to get someone from not working and not contributing to being able to hold a job again, being able to raise a family and make an income to support a family. If those things can occur, I would argue one is in the process of recovering. And once again, that can be anything from, they went from not being able to drive to now they can drive. Maybe they still can't work, but they can drive. That is a form of recovery and improvement. And it's a spectrum, right? I will agree, not everyone with a concussion to a severe brain injury makes 100% recovery. And I would agree that the more severe a brain injury is, the more likely you will never be the same person, but that doesn't mean you can't be doing the things you did before that you love. I mean, once again, not to harp on Kevin Pierce, he snowboards now. He went from not being able to walk.
He has a family.
He's got a family. He can find, and I just use it as an example of someone in the limelight who's had their story documented. You can see there's living proof right there. If you see him in Craig Hospital and you see him now speaking at things, at yoga retreats, snowboarding, and zipping through trees, I would agree. I think that is some form of recovery, and I think he would agree that he's reached some semblance of recovery. Maybe not his normal self, but better than it was day one.
Yeah. And for myself, even, am I 100% recovered? Probably not. On most days, I say I'm at 90, 95%. But I still have things that can set off my symptoms. And one example is I was on a road trip and it was raining all day. And so my wipers were going. And I got to my hotel that night and I was on a boat again. And I'm like, man, I haven't had these symptoms in so long. And I did my little exercises and I went to bed, and the next day it had resolved. But they can still creep up, right, with certain activity. But overall, 2 years ago, I would not have said 90%. 2 years ago, I probably would have said 70, 80. And then you helped me get another level with some of my dizziness. And I work full time again. I never didn't drive, but I'm very confident driving. I have, my balance is greatly improved. I attribute a lot of that to yoga as well, right? And it just pains me to think that there's people out there who believe that you can't recover. And like we've already kind of said, you might not get to 100%,
Mhm.
but isn't 80 or 70 better than 40?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there are some individuals and I get the healthcare arena, right? And you saw this with COVID, where there are sometimes false promises and there's
yeah,
false prophets.
yeah,
And I think we both would agree that recovering from a brain injury is not easy and it takes a lot of work, a
it's
lot,
not linear.
and it's not linear, but it can be done. And that's where I do struggle, where people are out there selling, here is the easy get better, do this. So I
Yes,
get where people's frustration, right? You can see this. It's kind of like it's different, but it's like in the cancer world when people talk about the ability to prevent cancer, and how that can be triggering for individuals with cancer, because it says, well, what could I have done better? This is my fault. And
right.
it's so hard to say, there's so many variables. So I can empathize and relate to where those things can be triggering, especially if one has struggled recovering and they haven't gotten the help they need and they've been told these
Yeah,
things. It's kind of like it's like it can be going against them, but it's just a shame that doctors are, and that's not, you see that all the time though. You see it not only in head injuries, you see it in a lot of chronic conditions is, well, if I don't know, it must mean it can't get better.
yes,
And it's like, well,
yeah,
people think just because people have a doctor in front of them that they must know everything, and they don't. None of, we don't. And it's okay to not know the answer to things, but how we set,
refer out. I mean,
yeah.
I begged my neurologist. I'm like, isn't there something we can try? Isn't there like PT, OT, uh, something out there that can help? And she was like, well, I don't know. I think this is just the best you're gonna get. And I just was like, I remember thinking, like, seriously, we're not gonna try anything?
Yeah.
Like it blew my mind. Um, and this was the neurologist, which is who you think
Mhm.
should know, right?
Mhm.
And then, like I said, it was 2 more years later before I found functional neurology. Um, and then I was blown away by the things that we could do to help. And unfortunately, our healthcare system's broken.
Mhm.
And a lot of the alternative treatments aren't covered by insurance,
Mhm.
right? Which is why a lot of people can't access the care. Um, Doctors don't refer out of their little network
Mhm.
to people that can help them. I mean, there's just so many barriers. And, I just had my 9-year brain anniversary on the 3rd. And so every year, I think it gets me worked up all over again about how I just need to be loud and get out there with my voice. Because if people don't even know about these resources, they're
Mhm.
not going to get better, right? Like recovery doesn't just happen. Like you said, there's no magic pill, there's no get better quick scheme, right? Like it takes hard work.
It does.
um like it was very hard work. It took me a good, I mean, I did like a 2-week intensive, but then it still took me months, if not, I think it was close to like a year and a half to like start seeing other results.
Yeah, and this comes back to like we talked about is, you know, think about it. If you go to your traditional healthcare provider and there's not much of an exam done, it's a model to where if they still look at the brain in a way that it doesn't change, why would you
Mhm.
assume that anything changes? And then once again, we know that medications are not really that helpful in concussions. I mean, symptom management, headaches, and but it
Right.
doesn't seem to be very helpful. So if every day you go to work and you see in your lens that they don't get better, I would think the same thing. But I feel fortunate that I have been around functional neurology for a long time, in practice myself and around people in practice. And when you see things, people talk about Dr. Carrick and it looks like a miracle, but when you see things day in, day out, you're like, oh no, Well, this totally makes sense. You can get better. And I tell
Yeah.
patients all the time is, and I actually stole this from Dr. Stedman of like, let me hold the hope for you until you have it, because I feel hopeful. I've seen this a
I
thousand
like that.
times, and I feel pretty confident you'll get better. I know you don't feel confident because everyone's told you won't get better, but I've seen this a ton of times. I'm pretty sure you'll get better. And then you have patients all the time that come in, and early on, they're super skeptical. And then eventually you can see like, oh, this is great. I'm doing so much better. And then they become, a voice and things like that. It's interesting. And this is kind of a side tangent that doesn't totally have to do with head injuries, but it's just in healthcare. And I saw this shift in my own father, who had pancreatic cancer, but right. So a diagnosis that is not good, right? It doesn't end up well for anyone. But it was funny because, things weren't working out how medicine told him would be, in a good way, right? He was doing well. And it was funny, he was watching a TV show and it was a very negative message on that diagnosis. And he turned to me, and it was so funny seeing the change of saying, man, I don't get why they don't put positive stuff in there. I was given 9 months, I'm 2.5 years in, and I'm still alive. And it was so funny seeing the change in his tune from day one, where he's like, and it all comes back to, you're not making things up in your head that this is going to be a magical story, but the stories we tell ourselves of where we can recover, we can get better, or it doesn't always have to be the way the doctor tells us. Too often we take the doctor's word as a word of God. And like I said, doctors, all of us, medical doctors, DCs, PTs, all of us, they're smart. We've been to school, but we're not God, and we don't know everything. And if I talk to my wife who's in surgery, whether you want to call it miracles or whatever it is, crazy things happen. The human body and the human mind, we don't understand. And to think that we can put it in our own to think we can understand ourselves, I don't think we ever fully will. The brain is a powerful thing. And so that was it was a thing that reminded me of, once again, mindset, and how if we listen to the non-empowering narrative, it's going to happen. You're not going to get better. If you're told time and time again, you can't get better and you don't feel better, why would you ever get better? And that doesn't mean sell people false hope. That doesn't mean tell people they're going to get better and charge them a bunch of money. It doesn't mean that. That's where you have to have proving objective data. And then the patient also saying, man, I feel better. I can walk 2 miles and I couldn't even get off the couch before. That is improvement.
Exactly.
So I think this is really important because it gives hope. And hope is like the only thing some of these individuals have. And if you don't have hope, what's the point?
And just the attitude's half the journey, right? And I know for me, when my doctor said, well, this is the best you'll get, you never get better, and I just had the drive in me, I was like, well, that's unacceptable. Like, I couldn't work, I mean, like, I couldn't do anything. It was horrible. I couldn't remember 2 seconds ago. Like, I mean, my life was just completely altered. And to have someone say, well, I guess this is the best you're going to be, which is, and then like you learn that that's incredibly outdated information. Even at that time, it was already way outdated information. And like, I just had that drive in me, and I was like, well, that's unacceptable. And like I said, that's when I turned to yoga to really like try to help. I'm like, well, if no one else is going to help me, I'm going to do it myself. And that's also when I started doing all my advocacy work, because I wanted other people to know that there are things that can help, and there is hope, and just to not give up hope just because a doctor, like you said, we have been taught to blindly trust our doctors. I watch it with my mom. What the doctor said is gospel, and I can tell her the same thing and she won't listen to me, right? Like, it's just
that generation
Yes.
is very, I had to battle with my dad, and near the end, I think he finally was like, oh God, forget these people. Like, but initially you're just like, oh, they know what's best. And then until you've been through it, you start to say, like,
Yeah.
most of these people don't have my best interest in mind.
Yeah.
But I think you hit on a great point of mindset. And I've told people this. I can usually tell day one how likely someone is to get better versus not versus their outlook. And you see this in pain research. So in pain research, this is a concept called catastrophizing. So the idea of catastrophizing is, and these are what are called yellow and red flags. And this work was some of the work done by Annie O'Connor. She's a PT out of Chicago who specializes in chronic pain. But recognizing these yellow and red flags, which are, this pain is so bad, I'll never be able to live my life again. This pain is so bad, I can't interact with people. So
Yeah.
when individuals start taking a symptom and it starts removing them from society, and they start feeling internally that maybe that pain is worse than it actually is, so the concept of catastrophizing, these are yellow and red flags warning you this is going to be a very difficult case to get better. And this is why we have more and more research showing that things like cognitive behavioral therapy are pretty powerful for chronic pain. And pain is just where they're the most researched. I'm going to make the argument that any neurological symptom is going to work the same. I see this in dizziness. So you have what's called triple PD, persistent perceptual postural dizziness, which is a central form of dizziness. And what is one of the confounding factors that increases your risk? Anxiety. Individuals who have pre-existing anxiety or who are neurotic individuals tend to be more likely to create this condition because their emotional brains perceive that there's still a threat. And so when I have an individual
that makes sense,
and they say, I can't get better, this is so bad and debilitating, I'm so broken, those are red flags that need to be addressed, because if they're not, they won't actually get better, versus the individual that comes in, they say, I'm still working, I'm going to get better, this sucks, I feel like shit, but I still got to work my job. Once again, not to keep harping on this as an example, going back, I look at my dad, he worked for 2.5 years up into the day he passed. And part of the reason I think he lived past a 6-month diagnosis was because he continued to have purpose. He continued to work, say, I'm not going to let this define me. I'm going to keep moving. And that's the same thing I see with my patients, is the ones who continue to live their life and try to put themselves into society, they will get better. And those who remove themselves from society and feel that they can't get better, they're going to have a very difficult time, because those are limiting beliefs. And that's not woo-woo science anymore. That is proven science that is seen in the pain science world, is filled with literature discussing how limiting beliefs will keep someone in chronic pain.
Yes.
So
I'm so glad you bring that up.
If someone is questioning what I'm saying, just look in the chronic pain world and you will see how outlook and things like therapy and counseling and altering mindset and threat responses will change someone's neurology. Look into the work of Annie O'Connor. She's got a great textbook called A World of Hurt, and it's all on this concept of chronic pain and pain science. Once again, you're saying, well, that's not brain injury, but chronic pain is a neurological event, right? Once you get into the brain, it's all the same. Chronic dizziness, chronic pain, it's altered neural circuitry. And if it can change in the pain arena, in the dizziness arena, why can't it change in other arenas as well, like brain injury?
Perry, this has been such good information. Thank you so much for sharing. I just want to take a moment, see if anyone has any questions. You can drop them in the comments if you're watching live. If you're watching the recording, go ahead and drop one and we'll try and respond to it for you. But Perry, why don't you just take a moment? if people want to find you and connect with you, it's integratedbraincenters.com.
Yep.
And I know that you guys do offer a complimentary phone consultation for anyone who might want more information. So let
Yep.
us know a little bit about that and a little bit about what it's like to work with you.
Yeah. So like you said, you can follow us at Integrated Brain Centers. And there we have a ton of educational webinars and all sorts of educational content. You can follow me on Dr. Perry Maynard on Instagram. And actually, I got to get back to posting, but that's where we also have a lot of testimonials. So going back to, we have a lot of people sharing their journey, which the reason I do that is for people to have hope. Is if they can see 10 people with chronic dizziness post-concussion and those people got their life back, they're like, well, if they got their life back, why can't I get my life back? So those are to bring hope to people. So that's something that's really great that we have on social media and on our website. And the whole point of the free consultation is to chat with individuals to learn their case, to see, do we think we can help? Or do we think an individual, maybe a neurooptometrist might be the best for them? Someone like Dr. Zielinski, who you've talked to a ton, or Dr. Terry Trinka, because that's the other piece, is that there's so many amazing providers that sometimes my goal is to guide you in that right direction, because unfortunately your traditional doctor is not going to do that. And so we can help guide people across the country to get to the right provider. And if individuals want to work with us, that's where we work with individuals from in-state of Denver and Colorado to out of state and out of the country. And individuals will fly in, and we'll sometimes do what are called intensives, where we'll work with individuals for a week to 2 weeks. It really allows us to understand their case, what broken parts of their brain are creating their symptoms, and then creating strategies to improve function, right? Maybe not heal, but improve function in those broken circuits. And a lot of times that equates to less symptoms and more functionality in life.
Great. Well, Perry, thank you so much. And I'll be sure to put all the links, and I wrote down the books you mentioned, so I'll try and get those all in the links below this video. So thank you so much for being here and sharing. I really appreciate. I think people are learning so much from these monthly TBI talks. I just think we can really dive into a topic each month and conquer it. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Amy.
And thank you everyone for watching. We will see you guys next month. Have a good day, everyone.